and I am here representing the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, one of the planning committee organizations for this event. My job will be moving us to the sections of the program, and I wouldn't be able to do this without Louie's wonderful Braille system. This webinar is being both live streamed and recorded and will be live on the NNELF and Braille Literacy Canada YouTube channels. I will give a land acknowledgement. The World Braille Day Planning Organizations acknowledge the historical oppression of land, cultures, and organizational peoples in what we now know as Canada. We respect and affirm the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across this land and will continue to honor the commitments to self-determination and sovereignty we have made to Indigenous nations and peoples. Please take a moment to acknowledge the lands on which you live, work, and play. The organizations who make up this year's World Braille Day Planning Committee include the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, Alternate Education Resources Ontario, Braille Literacy Canada, the Canadian Council of the Blind, the Centre for Equitable Library Access, CNIB Beyond Print, CNIB Next Generation, National Network for Equitable Library Services, and the Provincial Resource Centre for the Visually Impaired. We had a lot of fun working together and are pleased to deliver this event during the month of January in celebration of World Braille Day. Now, as you all know, online conferences are challenging in terms of etiquette because we all need to know how to mute and raise hands and such. So we're hopeful that please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. The voiceovers, just swipe right from the top of the screen until you get to that mute button. And for visual learners, it's at the bottom left corner of your iPhone screen. Alt-A on a PC and Option-A on a Mac will mute. Using the raise hand option, when you have a question, please double tap on your name in the participants list on an iPhone, or go into the More tab and find the raise hand. Alt-Y on a PC and Option-Y on a Mac will raise hands there. Save the use of the chat feature for urgent questions and comments. The recordings will be stopped after each information session prior to the question and answer period. Today's event begins with pre-recorded reflections with participants from previous World Day proceedings, answering a set of preset questions. The session will also include information from each of the planning program organizations. This will be followed by a live panelist who includes Jen Golden, Kim Kilpatrick, Natalie Martiniello, Nancy Waite, and Peter Tusick. And they will be commenting on what they've heard in the pre-recorded session, as well as answering other questions. So also at throughout the session, we will be having that all important door prize draw. So please stay tuned. We have some very nice door prizes for today's event. At this time, I'm going to pass it to Rianne to start our recorded sessions.
What's exciting in Braille right now? With Adam, Ioana, Peter, and Natalie.
I'm excited for a dimensional shift in tactile graphics, where 3D printed models may provide more information and better resolution to the reader. Tactile graphics feature raised lines and shapes on a page in what has been referred to as 2.5D. I'm excited to see some tactile graphics rendered as 3D models so that learners can explore in greater depth and have these models accompany the embossed volumes of the book.
I am always interested to see any developments in projects that facilitate sharing of Braille resources internationally so that they can be accessible as widely as possible.
So this is an absolutely awesome question. I think what I'm most excited about is not something physical. It's not a product per se. It's a standard. It's the eBraille implementation that we're about to see. We've seen the initial spec release, but having a Braille file, a digital document that contains navigation like an EPUB ebook would, having access to hyperlinks and footnotes and endnotes, if we're embossing that file, having access to the graphics, embedded within the same file, that is very exciting to me. And I think it will change the way all of us read Braille content. So, today's BRF files are these big walls of hard-coded text. If you're reading on a 40-cell Braille display and that file was made for a 32-cell Braille display, you're going to have long line, short line, long line, short line. You're going to miss the formatting. You're going to miss the spatial information. Where with eBraille, it won't matter what size display you're using, 14 cells, 18 cells, 320 cells, not going to matter. It's going to have automatic reflow. So there's this huge advantage to what we're about to get with these properly formatted spatial Braille files in a digital way, with the navigation, with proper tables of contents and all sorts of things that I think is extremely exciting for Braille and what it will mean for all of us who are Braille readers.
Well, lots of things about Braille are exciting to me. I'm really excited about anything I hear around lower cost devices being developed. So lower cost Braille displays, we've seen some start to hit the market in the past few years. Others are in prototype. And I think that's what will really get Braille into the hands of more people. Even developers working on more expensive Braille devices are thinking more about how to ultimately reduce the cost of those devices. And if they're not, I hope that they will more and more going forward. So those are things that are really exciting to me.
What makes someone a Braille reader? With Alan, Shelly Ann, and Natalie.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, a Braille reader is someone who learns Braille and uses it at any level, basically on a regular basis. And we know where that reading becomes part of that person's sort of daily life experience.
Hi, this is Shelly Ann Morris. I'm a Braille Zoomer, and I'd like to talk about what makes a Braille reader from my standpoint. Do I consider myself a Braille reader? Well, a Braille reader is anyone who reads Braille at any level. It can be basic Braille or advanced. It can be used for reading signs, room numbers, or labels on products. It can be used by those who like to read books as well. Some people use it for recipes or for speaking notes. Another way of looking at it is, what makes a print reader? Anyone who reads. I consider myself a very basic Braille reader. I read at the level that I need to know at this time.
So this is a topic really close to my heart because I focus a lot on adult Braille learning in my work, and I think I've started to see a shift in the way people even think about what it means to be a reader in recent years, both in print and in Braille, because we're starting to see that there's lots of ways that you can engage with reading, with writing, and with literacy. So, you can read Braille for traditional things like novels and books and magazines and Braille music, for example. Um, but you might also just read Braille for other things, to play board games with others, to read elevator buttons, to read public signage, to identify products at home, or to read labels on your appliances because, it's a quicker way to do than trying to find your phone and taking a picture of it. You might take notes for yourself. And so I think if you're using Braille in a way that's meaningful to you, and if Braille is allowing you to do whatever it is you want to do with reading and writing, then you're a Braille reader. I think everyone should have the opportunity to continue practicing and developing their Braille skills, to improve their reading fluency if that's something they'd like to do. But even if you can't read as quickly as someone else, even if you're a new Braille reader and you're still able to use Braille to do what it is you want to do, then you're a Braille reader.
How does the affordability of Braille devices and access to them change after K-12? With Ginny.
I think for this specifically, because when you're in elementary and like high school, a lot of things are sort of funded through the district, or you get technology within the classroom. You're able to use it more. Once you hit post-secondary, there is services to give you assistive technology. However, they are quite limited because it's for all students across BC with varying disabilities. So even if you want like a specific piece of technology, there's a lot more work that happens in terms of like applying for grants and applying for things, which you're doing and you're going to school. So it just kind of adds more stuff on to your plate. Not to mention, if you buy it out of pocket, a lot of these like Braille devices, Braille notes, and things like that are quite expensive. And a lot of people who are blind or partially sighted, and who are students, are often on like a specific income and can't unfortunately afford them. So it is definitely like a change.
Has the Accessible Canada Act or other provincial accessibility legislation improved access to Braille? With Jen, Kim, and Nancy.
In terms of the Accessible Canada Act, I guess my initial response is that I realize it does bring a lot of benefits to a lot of people, but a lot of my major access concerns have to do with things like books and having access to different, having access to Braille, being able to have different and software and hardware that will make different kinds of documents accessible to me. And so there is some relevance there with the Accessible Canada Act, but I feel like the primary ways that I've noticed accessibility improving have more to do with changes in technology than with the act itself.
I think the Accessible Canada Act and also the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act here in Ontario, where I live, has improved access to Braille. And advocacy for Braille to some degree, but I think it could go a lot further. I have noticed more Braille in elevators and buildings, especially new buildings, including our light rail system here. But I think we could do a lot more to get Braille on more things, on more products, and also on more documents and more signage and quality signage and universal placement of signage.
I think, if anything, publishers misunderstand the responsibilities under ACA. For example, just this week, I requested a file from a Canadian publisher, and they indicated the book was available as an ebook, and this would be sufficient for the student. But with 2 follow-up emails explaining that this was not sufficient, I still have yet to receive a file so that I can make the book into an accessible file for the student. So I think publishers really still kind of need to be informed what an accessible format is, and that just because a book is accessible, with air quotes, doesn't mean it's accessible for all. They still need to provide files so that accessibility offices can convert into a format for students or for individuals who would like to read that content. For example, this book, if we were going to create a Braille version, we would need that file so that we could convert it into Braille. I think AODI, on the other hand, has made it easier to obtain Braille, especially for organizations, but it's not a guarantee that you're going to get Braille. There are still issues with response times, and then attitudinal barriers. It's better, but there's still room for improvement. I do believe that the proposed education standard will greatly improve access, and I look forward to it being implemented.
Has the availability of Braille increased in the last 5 years? With Jen and Ginny.
Yes, the availability of Braille has definitely improved in the last 5 years. But it's funny, when I read this question, my first thought was, yes, in the last 5 years, sure. But if I go back to, say, 2010, and I know we're going back, that's 15 years now, it's hard to believe, but I would say for me, since then, it's been revolutionary how much things have changed. Because in 2010, I I did own a Braille display. I had one at work, but I didn't have like the whole, pairing a Braille display with an iPhone and all that has opened up with accessibility. So it's almost like 5 years, things have happened in the last 5 years, but it's like, in some ways I feel concerned that it's like, oh, well, things are good now, so we don't have to push as much. And it's like, no, things we still have improvements to be made. And so I actually think, even in the next 5 years, I'm sure we'll see some new devices, and, eBraille will continue to develop. But I think it'll be another 10 or 20 years before we would look back and go, oh my goodness, this is revolutionary. So much has changed. So it's almost like you have to widen the lens a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I haven't really seen improvement in terms of it being available. Unfortunately, I think that there's been such a shift for it to not be available, especially with technology and audio. And I definitely think there's room for improvement in terms of, in our daily lives. Technology can die at any time. If the power goes out, your technology dies, you're kind of stuck. And I think like Braille it's very much not obsolete. Like it is needed, especially in a school setting where you are learning fundamental skills, whether that's post-secondary, whether that's elementary, especially elementary, because those are like, you're learning fundamental skills of spelling and grammar. It's very much needed. And I find for me nowadays, as soon as I kind of shifted out of grade 12, Braille was no longer a real option.
The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians was founded in 1992 and was originally called the National Federation of the Blind Advocates for Equality. AEBC is a national, charitable, member-driven organization of primarily blind, deafblind, and partially sighted individuals from across Canada. We are dedicated volunteers who participate in working groups and committees at the national, provincial, and municipal levels of government. AEBC is a leader in leveling the playing field for our community, increasing awareness of our rights to ensure that we can equally participate in all aspects of society. We advocate for accessibility, equality, and the elimination of barriers in how governments, organizations, and businesses deliver programs, products, and services in Canada. AEBC offers more than just advocacy. We are a supportive community that connects people with similar life experiences, providing peer support both within and outside the organization to help members become more technologically literate and gain independence. We also provide annual scholarships to blind, deafblind, and partially sighted Canadian students wishing to further their education after high school. Our organization includes 3 contract staff members, a 7-member national board of directors, local chapters, and an affiliate spanning coast to coast to coast, various committees that carry out the work of AEBC, as well as more than 200 members. We are mainly funded by private donations. However, in 2023, we were successful in acquiring a 3-year federal government grant to support our work. We advocate for access to Braille whenever and wherever we can. For example, having Braille available on self-service kiosks, vending machines, and bank machines, Braille labels on products, medical supplies, and household appliances, as well as promoting Braille on elevators and all indoor and outdoor signage. We also lobby governments at all levels to ensure ballots and other election materials are available in Braille. We are currently working to ensure that standards within the Accessible Canada Act include Braille as well. Any information we provide is available in Braille upon request, and we hand out Braille brochures in English and French when we attend in-person events. Our blog features several Braille-related posts from members who are passionate advocates for Braille and the importance of Braille literacy at home, in school, and at work. We were participants in the TransLink initiative in BC that has successfully incorporated Braille bus and bay numbers and other relevant information on their bus stop signposts. For further information about the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, please visit our website at www.blindcanadians.ca.
How has technology improved access to Braille music, school, or work with Iwana
How has technology
and
improved
Natalie?
access to Braille music and Braille in the workplace? In terms of music Braille, Noteworthy progress has been made in free online conversion tools from printed score to Braille music. A good example is the Saomai Braille software and the accessibility features that have been added to MuseScore, which is a popular mainstream music writing software. Ongoing efforts are also being made by DAISY Consortium and its partners to develop guidelines for music publishers to produce files that are best suited for conversion into accessible notation. And finally, although this is not strictly related to the workplace, but to Braille access technology in general, I have to mention my absolute favorite, which is the recent remarkable improvement of the Braille screen input on iOS devices. It now is possible to access most functions of the iPhone using only Braille commands, and this has drastically increased my Braille usage on the iPhone and the iPad.
Well, technology has been a real big game changer. I think back to the early days in my education when, I had to wait for things to be produced in hard copy Braille. And sometimes I still do prefer and need hard copy Braille even now while working. But back then, that was really the only option. And often that would take very long, or I'd have to find other alternatives that were not as ideal or as accessible to me while waiting for that Braille. And now with a Braille display, I have quicker access to Braille. I use Braille every day in my work as a professor. I access my lecture notes through a Braille display. Very easily while sighted students are looking at the slides visually. I have access to my notes in Braille to follow along while I'm speaking, which is great because it's much easier to do that than trying to listen to a screen reader read out my slide notes while I'm talking. When I'm at a conference, I prefer to have hard copy Braille so that I could more easily skim on a full page of Braille. So I'll use my embosser, which is a Braille printer. When I'm in a meeting or a conference, I'll bring one of my smaller Braille displays so that I can access my notes or documents that others have sent in a really portable format. So these are all really good examples of how technology has improved access to Braille for me. I think two things to highlight, though, is that technology is one piece, but it doesn't solve everything. I mentioned that, there are still times when hard copy Braille is preferable or necessary. But also, we need to think about the accessibility of the documents we're trying to read, right? You might have a Braille display or a Braille embosser, but if you're reading an inaccessible PDF or trying to read a website that isn't accessible, that won't help you very much. So we need to continue advocating for digital accessibility, for accessible publishing, and we're starting to see positive changes in that direction, but we still have a long way to go there. And then the last thing I would say is that, I think it's important to highlight as we talk together today that not everyone has access to the Braille devices and other tools we're talking about. There are still many countries that don't have access to these resources. So we also need to continue pushing for those lower cost devices and other options for providing access to Braille reading and writing for everyone.
Has your Braille reading increased in the last 5 years? With Kim and Shelley Ann.
I think that my use of Braille has increased over the last 5 years. I'm lucky enough to own a Braille display that's I can connect to my phone, my PC, my Mac, and it's also one of the ones that I can read things on standalone. I use it for reading books, articles, news. I use it for my work as a storyteller and as a facilitator. I use it in meetings. I use it with my phone, paired with my phone for all kinds of apps So I feel that as time goes on, I really do use Braille more and more than I did as a young adult. Has my Braille reading increased over the past 5 years? Well, quite honestly, I wasn't reading Braille up until April 2020. I decided to learn Braille during the pandemic, and I started learning, and I enjoyed using it. I still do read Braille, and I still use it for many different things day to day, but I find that since we've been getting back out in the world, I haven't been using it as much as I'd like to. I really do wish that I had more time to use it and to read it and to write it and to practice it.
Why did you learn Braille? Do you have any advice for others? With Shelley Ann.
I had many different reasons for learning Braille to begin with. First of all, I had time to do it during the pandemic. Second of all, I was actually denied this opportunity when I was a child, because way back then, the thinking was if children with a little bit of vision, like I had, I'm a low partial, I do see a little bit and can still read print with glasses. And the thinking was if children with some vision were taught Braille, they would never learn to use their residual sight. Well, we know that's not true. I really wanted to learn Braille for several reasons. First of all, I was envious of my Braille reading friends who used it for speaking notes. They seemed to be able to speak so flawlessly. Second of all, I really wanted to learn Braille because I always wanted to send greetings and letters to my friends who were reading Braille. It just seemed kind of unfortunate that I would send them something in print and then they would have to rely on somebody else to read it for them, or they'd have to get out a screen reader and use it that way. So I thought, why not learn to do something and make things more accommodating for my friends who do read Braille? I think they really appreciate that. One of the other reasons that I decided to learn Braille is as we get older, we really have to make effort to keep our minds busy. And I wanted to take on a new skill. I wanted to keep my mind active and busy. What advice would I have for people who are thinking about learning Braille? I would say just do it and have a lot of fun with it. It's really interesting because some people think that learning Braille must be this daunting task. What do all these dots mean? How in the world am I going to make sense out of them? Well, I thought that too. But then, having talked to a lot of my Braille-using friends, they basically demystified it for me. They said, you know, the dots actually follow a logical pattern, and they do. So, when I joined the Braille Zoomers, that mystery was unlocked. There were some really nice resources that I had, and that really helped. Also, being involved with a group of other Braille learners, all doing the same thing, really helped to keep me motivated and encouraged. Learning Braille is a bit of a solitary pastime, but it's also good to get involved with a group of others who are doing the same thing and really have fun with it and learn from each other and support each other. Another piece of advice I would have, and it's something that I know I need to do more of, is use Braille on a daily basis. Label common household things that you use, jars and bottles and cans. Also, maybe make a few notes in Braille. Try making a shopping list in Braille. It might not be perfect, but it's a good exercise. Just keep at it. It can get frustrating at times. I know for me, I still stumble over punctuation, and I really have to work at it. But do keep learning and keep trying. And above all, don't give up and have a lot of fun learning Braille.
Is Braille still important? How do we better advocate for Braille and dispel the myth that Braille is no longer relevant? With Kai, Karen, Kim, and Natalie.
Absolutely. I think we need to dispel the myth that Braille is not important, because it is. I use Braille every day for simple things like labeling, marking appliances. I use it to take short notes. And I don't think I would have graduated with my undergrad degree in kinesiology if it weren't for access to Braille, whether that's literary Braille, Nemeth Braille. I think all that really helped me learn, and I'm certainly a much more fluent communicator and advocate because
as lead for Braille literacy youth programs, I like to get creative with Braille because I'm trying to capture the interest of young Braille readers and writers as they build skills and habits that will carry them through life. But for those of you who learned as adults, Braille may be just a tool. It's how you read, it's how you write. It's really no big deal. And in a perfect world, it shouldn't be a big deal. But guess what? We need to make it a big deal if public perception is going to change. I want to talk to those of you who are not on social media. And don't worry, I'm not going to tell you that you need to get onto social media. Here's what I think the average person on the street perception about Braille is that we are up against. Ready? Here we go. I never see people reading Braille, therefore I guess we don't need Braille anymore. So, here's my big real-life idea for all of you. Read Braille in public. And if that sounds scary, find someone to make a print button that you can wear while you're reading Braille in public that says, "Don't ask me what I'm doing, I'm reading Braille." And if the idea of reading Braille in public sounds exciting to you, when people interrupt you while you're reading Braille in public, talk to them about why you read Braille. Get proactive. Wear a button that says, "Ask me why I love Braille." Or get creative and find unique places to read Braille in public. People are watching, people are noticing, and while you're reading Braille in public, they're learning that Braille is important.
I do definitely feel the myth that Braille is no longer relevant should be dispelled in any way possible. I think it should be a high priority for us to do this. I really think one of the ways of doing this is to make Braille so normalized, as it's starting to be on elevators and other places, on signs, that people are just used to knowing that Braille is there. I think we also need to dispel the myth that it's difficult to learn Braille at older ages. But I do think that by having Braille more available on products, for example, the EU has it on all medication boxes and bottles, I think those type of things will help us to dispel the myth. I think also using Braille and demanding Braille whenever possible, talking about Braille devices and trying to get the price of Braille devices to go down somewhat so more people can afford to have them will help with this.
So yes, there's definitely still a need to dispel the misconception that Braille is no longer needed. I know it is the most common statement. Many of us here as Braille users, and the most common question that we receive often is, is there still a need for Braille? Isn't it being replaced by technology? All these other things, right? And so I think, there's a time and a place to address those questions, but we also need to move beyond that because there are lots of other priorities in the Braille community, and I think we can also dispel that misconception just through example by showing Braille being used, by talking about how it's being used, by talking about how we can increase access to Braille by just having those examples. I think something that I often do to educate others about Braille and address those misconceptions is encourage them to replace the word Braille with print, right? No one would ever say, is print still needed now that we have access to audiobooks, right? So the same is true for Braille. And then, obviously legislation is important. We need to ensure that Braille is available in public places alongside education, right? So if we have more examples of Braille being used, if Braille is more available, that will also go a long way to kind of dispelling a lot of those misconceptions.
Well, hi there, it's Daphne Hitchcock from Braille Literacy Canada. We're pausing here just to circle back to our fabulous presenters. Thank you, Peter, Jen, Kim, Natalie, and Nancy for being here in the live format to just reflect on those questions that were posed recently. Do you have anything to add to what we just have had questions on? Any one of you?
It's Kim. I have something to say. And
Yeah,
that's
thanks, Kim.
a big shout out to Karen Brophy, because she pointed out something that I do all the time, which is read Braille in public. So I can be in a coffee shop, I could be, waiting for an appointment, sitting on a bus or a train or, whatever, and using Braille. And I do get a lot of comments. What's that? How easy is it? People find the Braille displays fascinating. And I think that does open up that conversation. So I really think her idea of, even if you're a not as advanced a Braille user, if you can read in public, reading the elevator buttons, reading buttons on door, reading menus in restaurants, it gets everybody seeing Braille. And the fluency and beautifulness, people comment on how beautiful people's hands look when they read Braille, and how fast, and how not everybody, but those of us who've used Braille a long time. And I think that is a huge step to do, and a relatively easy thing to do, because I've always got Braille and I always love reading things. So I think that's a great call to action. So I really love that.
Oh, great. Thanks, Kim. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Jen. Just to add into that, I totally agree as well. And I, like Kim, I read Braille in public all the time, not because I'm seeking to read Braille in public, but just because it's what I do. And it's not something that I sort of have a strong, like, oh my goodness, I feel weird, or oh, I'm really excited. It's just I do it because it's a part of life. And I also get a lot of comments. And so I think it's really, I like that Karen sort of did that, and encourage people to do it. Kind of, I don't know that I've ever heard it quite like that. The only other thing I wanted to say is that one thing that struck me while listening to our responses is that sometimes, somebody would say something and then I would say something and it would sound like I was like, oh, Jen obviously doesn't agree with what that other person said. But what I think is really interesting is that I don't think that's actually the reality, like the Accessible Canada Act, for example. I totally agree with what Kim said and with what others said about the things it does make available. It's just, I think that we sometimes look at things from different angles. So I guess I'm just saying that for people who hear it and may think that we, and not that it's wrong to disagree, because that's okay too. But I think as I listened to people, even though they said kind of different things than what I said, I thought, I do agree with them. I just was looking at the situation from a different perspective. So I don't know if that's helpful to anybody, but
Yeah.
it was something that struck me.
It's Peter Tusick, and I just want to say from the question of what a Braille reader is, when you break it down, I think all of us, myself and everyone on the panel, we don't, as much as, regardless of when we learn Braille, we don't use it all day, every day. And some of us may read an entire novel or consume, lots of information. Some of us might just use it to read the microwave that we had labeled or to read the elevator buttons. And I think that that answer was great, right? We use Braille when and where we can. I think all of us, and I work for a Braille technology company that is very Braille centric, and even myself, certainly I don't have a Braille display attached to myself at all times. We all want to, and I think should use Braille even more than we do. We don't use Braille as nearly as much as a sighted person reads print. There's no doubt about it. We certainly don't do so if we don't have access to refreshable Braille devices, or if we just don't have, Braille in our immediate environment. But I think if you're using Braille, even if it's once every week or 2 or 3, to simply read the buttons on an elevator, or you use Braille to just take in or write down a phone number with your slate and stylus every now and then, that is a Braille user, and it gives us a large advantage over not using Braille. And so I never, for someone who's learned like myself from the age of 3 or 4, we kind of take it for granted that I know Braille. But I think that for anybody who's newer, I've worked with adults into their 80s who are learning Braille, and it's much harder to learn. But even using it and learning it, and even having access to it at that point in time, is extremely important. And you are absolutely a Braille reader if you can use Braille in some sense.
This is Natalie. First of all, I agree with everything that others have said. One of the things that I found very cool just listening to all the responses is how just the gratitude, or how much we all how we express our love and appreciation for Braille. And I think it's such a striking contrast to that public perception and those misconceptions. So I think, I love what Karen said about using Braille in public just because you're using it. It doesn't have to be a conscious choice. It's just because you're using it in your daily life. But the moment those people who don't know anything about Braille actually speak to a Braille user, that's the moment when that misconception is shattered, because it's just so obvious. We're all different and we all use Braille in different ways. Some of us are longtime users, some of us are adult Braille learners, but all of us are kind of united in the impact it's had on our lives.
It's Kim. Can I circle back to something which makes me very sad? And I think this is something we've known for a long time, and we need to advocate for. And that is what Jenny said about having Braille all through public school. This was a case for me too, and that was many years before she went through it. In university, I got there and was told, no, you can't have your stuff in Braille. And I kind of rolled over, and I know Jen Golden and I've had this talk where she lobbied and got Braille, and I didn't, and I felt like a less competent advocate for Braille at that time. But
you're
it
not.
sort of jumps back to, thank you very much, kind of jumps back to this is still going on, that we give these kids these expensive products. I mean, Peter's wonderful Braille note touches, and maybe now the Monarch, which is even more expensive. And then we take it away. It would be like giving someone a fancy wheelchair and then saying, now you have to sit in a hospital wheelchair. Sorry. And I find this appalling and sad to me, that we give kids these things and then we take them and we expect them to function as they did with these things. And often I didn't complain about it that much until I got Braille back. I got a Braille display given to me, and I cried for 20 minutes. I've told people this before, because I realized I now have Braille and I haven't had it for years. And I was reading emails crying in my office, and I said, I'll never do without Braille again. That sounds like Gone with the Wind. But, it really strikes me that this has not changed enough. And it does make me sad to think that.
Well, and Kim mentioned that I lobbied and did get Braille, and I did, and that's great, but I shouldn't have had to. I shouldn't have had to fight. And I sort of went into the situation expecting that the Braille would be there, and it wasn't. So even if you do lobby, it's great if you do, but you shouldn't have to. You're like an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid going to university, and your whole world is changing, and all of a sudden you have to fight for your stuff that you didn't know you'd have to do that.
I agree. It's Natalie. I think we talk a lot about like having self-advocacy skills as a young blind person. And sure, of course, that's a great life skill to have. But your ability to access, literacy or your materials, your school textbooks in Braille shouldn't depend on how well you're able to advocate. You really shouldn't have to
100%.
fight, like some people are more comfortable doing that than others. Some people are just better at doing that than others, but you should have access to all the same information as everyone else, and that it shouldn't depend on that at all. And it definitely still is happening, even though, there's legislation and policy, but that only goes so far if, we're still having to kind of address all of those perceptions that maybe Braille isn't as needed because there are other methods. And there's lots of people advocating for Braille. There are changes, but the fact that it's happening at all is, I think, telling too.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. These are such great comments, and we could really delve into a lot of this to keep going, but I'm mindful of the time, so I'm just going to pause our reflections a little bit and turn the dial a little and ask you this question. If you could go back and tell your teachers about something they did or did not do that impacted either your post-secondary experience or your first experience at the workforce, what would that be? What would you go back and talk to your teachers about?
This is Natalie. This is going to sound like a very obvious answer, but I would go back to my TVI who introduced Braille to me, and I would thank her for that, because when I was younger, I had some low vision, and it wasn't kind of a decision by default that I would learn Braille. We really had to advocate for it, and in addition to my family, it was also those TVIs and teachers who supported that. And I, like a lot of people here, I know for a fact that there are a lot of things I would not be able to do without Braille. So I would just go back and thank her for ensuring that I learned those skills early on.
This is Jen.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is Jen. That was really good, and I feel kind of guilty that I didn't think about thanking my TVI, even though I'm still in touch with her. But I would suggest to her that I should have learned the slate and stylus before I learned the Perkins Brailler, because in my 7-year-old mind, it was backtracking to it, like it's using a typewriter and then going back and using a pencil, sort of. And so I wish that I'd been taught those things the other way around. I did eventually come to rely on the slate and stylus all the time, and I'm glad. And that might sound weird in an age where we use a lot of technology, but there's really no replacement in a way for being able to use a slate and stylus. And so that's one thing that I wish she'd done differently, as wonderful as she is.
It's Kim. I would say yes, thank you to the people who taught me Braille, and thank you especially because I do remember being in grade 1 and the teacher just saying, other people read with your eyes, you will learn to read with your hands. So there was no, this is going to be hard, this is going to be, it was very matter of fact. And I said, oh, okay, so that. I also appreciate that they didn't say I was writing backwards with a slate. It took me like 4 or 5 years, like I learned in grade 2, I think. And when I was in about grade 6, someone said, oh, cool, you're writing backwards, because, that just changed it. She just said, for the slate, that's 1, 2, 3 on the right. And I do appreciate that matter of factness, that it was explained in such a way that didn't make me feel that it was complicated. I appreciate that. One thing I wish I had known was that maybe near the end of high school, especially if there were, and I did not have a blind low vision TVI. I had a wonderful TVI who's still my friend too. But if someone had sat down with me and explained to me how to advocate for Braille, possibly in post-secondary, like we were talking about the previous question, how do you advocate for that? And you may have less access. And what would you do if you did? And maybe scenarios to prepare me for the fact that I might have to fight for Braille, because I would have been like an animal fighting for it. If I knew how to do it properly, I would have wanted to fight for it. Yeah, I think so.
Anybody else want to contribute? Well, thank you for that. And right now, we're going to slide back into our pre-recorded session. And thanks very much for the contributions from Peter, Jen, Kim, Natalie, and Nancy.
Technology things are kind of
Another 5 years or 200 years. Well, in the thinking about Braille over the last 5 years, where do I think that Braille will be in another 5 years or 200 years? Well, in the near future, I hope for development in access to Braille on 3 fronts, I would say. First is Braille education. I would hope to see more and more people become aware of the importance of Braille literacy at all levels of society. And this would be seconded by the availability of a robust network of educators that can provide quality Braille instruction to everyone and anyone who needs it. Then I would hope for the continuing trend of seeing better and more versatile Braille displays at a lower and lower price point. Finally, I would hope for further development of funding mechanisms that help provide Braille education and put these new devices in the hands of everyone who could benefit from them. And in 200 years, wouldn't it be nice if we would see Braille being as widely available as print? And how about if we had like a paper-thin, portable Braille display that could instantly translate any print, be it books or music or anything, and bring it to our fingertips?
To be honest, I hope that what we have improves. It's hard to foresee what technology will be like in 200 years, although given how much it's changed in the last 200 years, it can be really exciting. I think, and this isn't really a technology thing, so I'm kind of going off the question, but just in the next 200 years, I would hope that we get to the point where we don't have to defend the need for Braille. We don't have to defend its importance. We don't have to fight for it. It would be great if we didn't have to keep having these conversations about technology making Braille obsolete. So I think, again, not really a technology thing, but I would hope that we would get to that point.
Braille development has been really exciting in the last 5 years, I think, in terms of digital access to Braille. Braille displays have gone down in price. We've seen programs implemented where people are getting access to free Braille displays. So, for example, the e-readers that patrons are getting from the National Library Service in the United States. We've seen a renewed interest, perhaps, and really excitement around different types of new technologies, new types of ways of moving Braille dots up and down, which has made some Braille displays more affordable than others. And of course, the emergence of multi-line Braille displays, along with ones that can display tactile graphics. And so I think really those are the big developments that will continue to be a thing in the next 5 years. And I think as we continue to promote access to Braille and the importance of Braille, we're going to hopefully see greater availability.
I'm truly hoping that within the next 5 years, Braille will be more integrated in places like post-secondary education, workplaces, and more I would say with affordable devices. And devices that will be available across the world. I think this is one way to empower greater independence and inclusion in society.
As far as where I hope we'd be with Braille over the next 5 years and 10 and 20 and 50, I'd love to see more of an easier back and forth between Braille and print. We have Braille translation software programs that are wonderful, but a lot of times for math content, for all that STEM content, we need, to have a process to get that to and from that Braille user. I would love to see a more immediate, and it won't be perfect. We need Braille transcribers to proofread, to create certain types of content, make sure the labels are right, to double check or triple check some of this. But I would love to see a way for myself to take a map, for instance, or to take a diagram or a book at the library that is not available in Braille that might contain formulas or various things, and more easily convert that into a Braille document that I could read. I think we will start to see this. It's what AI is going to bring. And again, we're not going to be getting rid of a Braille transcriber, but I'd love to see that translation piece improve over the next 5+ years, and even as we really go forward, just more on-demand Braille would be the general sort of natural progression of that.
Highlighting BLC, Braille Literacy Canada.
This is Daphne Hitchcock, President of Braille Literacy Canada. Braille Literacy Canada, BLC, was established in 1990 as the Canadian Braille Authority. The purpose of BLC is to give Canadians a unified voice while promoting the use and availability of Braille in Canada. BLC can be accessed right across the country from coast to coast in rural and urban areas. We do not have a physical headquarters but support a mailing address in Toronto. Our business, committees, and programs are conducted virtually. BLC supports the membership with programs and initiatives, but also provides a number of excellent resources on our website, including links for documents to do with Braille standards and a list of Braille producers. The membership is comprised of Braille readers, transcribers, producers, educators, rehabilitation professionals, and anyone else who supports our mission and objectives. Our board is made up of 16 volunteer members, with more than half who have lived experience with vision loss. A not-for-profit charity, we are reliant on private donations from individuals, funding donations from founding member CNIB, and membership fees. The main purpose of the organization is to educate and advocate for equitable and timely access to high-quality Braille for those who are blind, deafblind, or who have low vision. BLC is recognized by the International Council on English Braille as the authority for the development, adoption, and implementation of standards relating to English Braille codes in Canada. We run some terrific initiatives. The Brailler Bounce is a program in which we accept broken or disused Braillers. We pay to have them fully serviced and brought into like-new condition. Then these Braillers are rehomed to folks on our wait list at no cost to the recipient. And every year, we award scholarship funds to individuals seeking to become certified in Unified English Braille or Braille Music through the Edie Moore Scholarship Fund. The application period is currently open until the end of March. And this June, we mark the 5th anniversary of our annual Braille Symposium, an afternoon of presentations on aspects of Braille presented by experts in the field of Braille from around the world. And ongoing throughout the year, we host the Braille Zoomer Group, a mentoring program for adults who are new to vision loss and learning Braille. These are just a few examples of the work we are doing. We can be found on social media, including YouTube. Our website is www.brailleliteracycanada.ca, or reach out to us by email info@blc-lbc.ca, and be sure to check out our 2024 Accessible Signage Guidelines, a valuable resource for signage producers and fabricators.
If you could have anything Braille related, what would it be? With Kim and Peter.
If I could have anything in Braille, What would I have? Well, I would have a multi-line Braille display that could read text, spreadsheets, graphics, that would have a camera with it that you could take a picture of something and it would make it into a graphic, could read maps, and that it would be very lightweight and portable that you could carry with you all the time. The Braille display cells would be durable and resistant to things, dirt and liquids and all of that. That would be the thing I would love. I would also love to have everything labeled in Braille, I think, as I said in a previous question, but even clothes, that you could go into a store and there would be Braille labels on clothes so you would know what colors they were, and that when you hang them up you would know what colors they were without having to label them. So all the products, food, clothes, all of that. But the multi-line Braille display, that's pretty inexpensive, maybe feels like a tablet, about the weight of a tablet. That would be the greatest thing.
If I could have anything at all Braille related, no limits, it would definitely be maps of cities with proper Braille labels, streets, things I could zoom into on demand. Right now, even there are wonderful programs out there that can create maps, things like T-Maps and others, where you can put in an address and kind of get your general vicinity or surroundings. But there is no way to take a map of a city I've never been and comprehend or drill down into various parts of that city without doing lots of legwork beforehand. I'd love to have tactile Braille maps with street layouts, street grids of cities and places, even where I live, of places with the Braille labels in. I think that would be ultimately the dream. And I think we could be moving in that direction. We have these dynamic tactile devices that can allow us to view maps and scroll and do some of that. We're not limited by the size of a printed page or an embossed page as we once were, but that is still going to be quite a ways off in terms of it just being truly dynamic and fluid, where you could say, I want to look at this place and kind of Google Earth that and have that become a Braille or tactile experience. But I would love to see something like that as we go forward.
Thank you to our sponsor, Humanware. And our lucky winner for a stream 3 is Glenn Septke. So we'll be in contact with you, Glenn. Congratulations.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michel Pepin from Humanware, and I'm Humanware's Canadian Sales Director. Humanware is a Canadian-based company out of Montreal and one of the world's leading Braille manufacturers. Some of you may know us better through our product name, from the Victor Reader to our Braille in Braille display, or our Note Taker, from the Empower to the Braille Note Touch Plus. For more than 35 years now, Humanware has developed and manufactured intuitive and intelligent solutions that change the lives of people living with visual impairment and vision loss. Whether it's used at home, in the classroom, or in the workplace, Humanware technology helps people worldwide see things differently, to be fully engaged and participate in their daily activity and live their lives more independently. Over the last 23 years of career with Humanware, people often ask me, why do you do what you do? Or 23 years seems like a long career with the same organization. Well, to me, the answer is simple. I truly believe that the product we manufacture makes a difference, makes an impact in our users' life. There's no greater reward to me to hear users, parents of users, or even teachers of users telling me that the product we manufacture has made an impact or making an impact in their life, whether it is to go to school, go to college, university, get a job in the workplace, or even find more independence in their daily activity. Hearing this gives me a sense of fulfillment, knowing that we are doing and we are changing people's life. One of our newest products that I'm particularly proud of is called the Monarch. The Monarch is the first dynamic, tactile, and multi-line Braille tablet. It provides its user an advanced Braille reading and real-time tactile integration, providing equal access to information in real time. Monarch is truly a revolutionary multi-line Braille device that renders tactile graphics integrated with Braille on a 10-line by 32-cell refreshable display. With access to downloadable digital books and tactile graphic image, it significantly reduced the time to fingertips. Monarch is not just a Braille display. Loaded with applications such as graphing calculator, ebook reader, and Brailler, and so much more, it represents a shift towards an inclusive landscape, breaking down barriers and paving the way for a future where everyone can enjoy equal access to information. We can certainly say that Monarch is a 21st century Braille solution. To find out more about Monarch or any of HumanWare's solution, please log into our website at www.humanware.com. I take this time to wish you all a great and wonderful World Braille Day 2025.
Are there any Braille highlights or lowlights from the last 5 years that you'd like to share with Nancy, Natalie, and Peter?
I think for me, the community, I've had the opportunity to connect with more people who either read or produce Braille in the last 5 years, so that's definitely a highlight. I think the other one is technology. I think there's a potential to improve access and reduce turnaround times, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that brings.
There are lots of Braille highlights over the past 5 years. I think the thing that I find the coolest and the most exciting are all the examples of virtual Braille communities or initiatives that have popped up. So I'm thinking of things like the Brailleist Foundation in the UK, the Braille Zoomers program through Braille Literacy Canada for a lot of adult Braille learners. This is the first time they've had access to other Braille learners and Braille users in the community, especially for those who are learning at a distance. And I've heard about even more recently virtual Braille book clubs. That is really exciting to see. And also all the examples of Braille users using their platform, the YouTube channel, social media, to educate others about Braille, to address misconceptions. I think all of that is really exciting to see. And I also love drawing on those resources when I'm speaking to future blindness professionals too.
I think in general, one of the highlights of Braille is this exponential growth and kind of advent of the just general switch toward multi-line Braille devices. There have been multi-line Braille products out for a number of years, going back into the 80s, but now we're seeing them actually be readily available. We're seeing devices like the Monarch. We're seeing, we know the Bristol Braille product has been out for some time. We are seeing others, and I think we'll see more modular approaches. I think there's a lot we're going to continue to see, but to me, that's been the highlight. And it is certainly a digital sort of focus here with the multi-line access, but we're able to then consume multi-line content, spatially accurate. Eventually, we're going to have this with our screen readers, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, tables, all sorts of things that just were not available to us. We lived in a very linear world when it came to refreshable Braille for a very long time. And I think we're really, we're starting to see that change. Of course, HumanWare and myself, I've been very fortunate to play a role in being part of this shift as we talk about the Monarch. But I think this will be something we really, really can be proud of. In the last 5 years have shown us that multi-line Braille is here to stay.
Highlighting CCB, the Canadian Council of the Blind.
Well, I'm very pleased to be with you today as we prepare to celebrate Braille in Canada. It's been a month of great celebrations, and I'm glad to participate on behalf of the Canadian Council of the Blind. In terms of a little description of what the Canadian Council of the Blind is, it's a national organization of visually impaired persons who are involved in a range of activities. We do have advocacy activities that we work on. We have a specific committee. But we have chapters across the country that engage in a range of activities. For example, we'll be seeing how all this plays out in February in Sydney, Nova Scotia, when curling returns as a major CCB event. COVID put an end to that, but we're pleased to say that this year curling will be resuming with teams from across Canada coming to Sydney to participate in a few days of competition during White Cane Week in February. But to the point specifically of talking about where CCB stands in the promotion of Braille, we're very pleased to say that CCB was a founding member of Braille Literacy Canada, and I'm here as the second vice president to talk a little bit about that. That support has taken several forms. We have indeed had several of our members over the years participate in the Brailler Bounce program, and we're pleased to say that that is a very important program that BLC certainly does well with, and we continue to support it. We also have, more recently in the last few years, set up a Braille display users group that really promotes, for those who are keen to use Braille displays, the technology that these devices enable us to use very fully in our day-to-day work and our recreational activities. And the people who are part of this group bring a range of Braille display technologies to the discussions. And these discussions take place approximately twice a month between September and June. And they're engaging discussions because people share their thoughts on how well they do with the displays. They raise questions. And I think it's a place for those who really want to learn more about Braille displays. We certainly encourage people to join us and learn from what we do and have done. And I will give you an email that people can contact us if they wish to join our Braille display group. It's gtt@ccbnational.net. I'll repeat, if you want to join our group, it's gtt@ccbnational.net. In terms of membership, if you have a visual impairment, you are entitled to join. The $10 membership fee, and you're welcome to join a chapter in your particular geographic area and engage in the range of activities that they have, and certainly follow us for the Braille discussions that we have as well, and we promote those as well through CCB when there's an appropriate meeting to let people know about. The other point that I would add is that the CCB has been around in Canada for 80 years. In fact, in 2024, we celebrated our 80th anniversary, and we look forward to many more years in the future.
What do you wish for the Braille future with Kim and Peter?
I really hope that we will have lower cost Braille displays available, that we will all have the availability of having multi-line Braille displays, which we can use to read text, calendars, spreadsheets more easily, also graphics and maps. I would love to see Braille be in more Indigenous languages with their codes. I would also love to see Braille on all products in the grocery stores, in the pharmacies, that Braille is just part of what you put on when you put on a label. I would love to see that. Braille everywhere, signs everywhere. All the information is automatically available in a format we can use for Braille.
As far as the future of Braille, I would love to have, a lot more digital Braille signage. Imagine signage that was dynamic. I think we're seeing this with certain types of technology. The Braille cell technology is becoming thinner. Access to Braille as a code will remain the same, and we've seen great strides with UEB and uniting English-speaking countries and other pieces there. But I really think that digital Braille signage will be something that will be more of a reality. I know that this exists in some forms in kiosks in certain Asian countries. They've started this. I think we'll see a lot of this expanding. And I would hope for a future where you would not only have a men's or women's restroom sign on a door, but have that signage at a train station telling you what track the train was going to be on, or giving you, the meetings for today in a particular building, as sighted people kind of have when they look at signs when you walk into a conference center and things. So hopefully we'll see something like that come out of, and the near future with Braille.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, again for these wonderful contributions and answering questions. So we're going to take a little pause here to reflect back on the questions that have been just previously answered. And I'm wondering if any of our live panelists here would like to add a reflection on to those. Well, let's move on then and circle to a question that we have for you right now. What would you like to see more available in Braille for leisure, personal enjoyment, or for hobbies? So how can we expand Braille for leisure, personal enjoyment, or hobbies? Go ahead.
This is Peter Tusik.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, go ahead, Kim. Go for it.
No, you go ahead. You were first.
All right. I think that, oftentimes we will find in restaurants and things, we have access to Braille menus, but those menus aren't updated. Even if they do exist, a lot of time the content that is available isn't necessarily kept up to date. So if we do have some Braille that somebody can dust off somewhere for us, and restaurants come to mind. I think there are other examples of this. A lot of times at public attractions, there might be a Braille book at a zoo or at a museum or some sort of guide, but there's no one there to check these sorts of things. I'd love to see, and it would be a company. This would have to be some sort of for-profit venture, or somebody have to really invest some time into this, but a way to have a repository of information that, whether it be menus or attractions, and this would probably start at more of a city or local level, but trying to keep a lot of that information up to date for places where the blind customer or a blind patron would frequent. I think that would be something I'd love to see, because I can't often, I'm on the road a lot, 30 sometimes more weeks a year, and there are times where I do come across Braille, and I'm thrilled to see it in a space that I'm not accustomed to Braille, and then the Braille turns out to be something that was produced several years ago or just has a lot of inaccuracies. So I'd love to see a bit more of that from a leisure standpoint, just coming across Braille that was relevant.
Nice.
Yeah, that I would too, Peter. Definitely, for sure. One thing I'd like to see, two things I'd like to see. One is Braille booklets, and I know that here in Ottawa, at a couple museums, we've helped, and I know Jen Golden's company helped with this, and we consulted on this, is to have books for exhibitions at the museum that you could check out from the front counter and go through the museum reading the things that are by the exhibit. So you can read, what's written on the walls as you go. And I love those books. I wish more museums and places, attractions would have that. All Braille programs for all plays and concerts and everything. I also would love to see Braille overlays. If you think about leisure things for, say, gym equipment, our appliances, other things. I know some companies have Braille overlays for things, but I would like to see way more of those available to us naturally, so that we could use all these equipment that are touchscreen like and not accessible to us for, places that we go, things like that. Would love that. Signs in parks and things like that too.
Nice. Thanks, Kim.
So I work in post-secondary, and I think for my group, what I would really like to see is just a bit of communication about the availability of Braille for personal enjoyment, like Braille books. I don't know that my group, like my post-secondary students, are always aware of books that are available. I know that they're aware of the textbooks, but sometimes it's not always evident. Like when they're coming from public school, the books that they need to read are available, and then when they go into high school or to post-secondary, the books that they're required to read are available. But there's this, personal enjoyment availability through Sealer, through Nels, and I think sometimes that communication aspect, that target group isn't always thought of, perhaps. So I think that would be really, in my mind, that would be, I would like to see more advertising, maybe from the public library. Hey, did you know that you have access to these books?
Thanks, Nancy. Oh. Anybody else?
I think this is Natalie. I think others have highlighted a lot of really great things. I would also love to continue seeing support for a hard copy Braille. I think all these technology developments are really exciting, but there's always going to be those times when we just want to have access to something on paper. So I hope we continue having access to hard copy Braille just as easily if that's what we want. A good example of that for me is I'd love to see greater access to magazines in Braille. And we're starting to see a lot, more of that. But that for me is a good example of when I like having access to hard copy Braille because you can skim more easily through a magazine. But also what others have said about, just having Braille just by default on appliances when you buy them, so you don't even have to do the Braille labeling yourself. It's just everybody agrees that, if you're putting a print label on it, you're going to put a Braille label on it before it's available for sale. Just as, I think it was Kim mentioned that just as the medication in the EU includes Braille labels as well by default.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. Anybody else? Wow. Let's go with the next section of our retrospective. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. And I think Rianne is just bringing that into play.
Highlighting CELA, the Center for Equitable Library Access.
The Center for Equitable Library Access, CELA, is a fully bilingual national not-for-profit organization that provides accessible reading services to the more than 3 million people across Canada with print disabilities. Established in 2014, CELA works through Canadian public libraries to provide access to a growing collection of over 1.2 million titles in multiple accessible formats, including Braille, print Braille, electronic text, and audio. CELA is funded through a combination of federal support, provincial and territorial support, and some individual library support. Braille is a key component of CELA's collections and services. CELA has a collection of more than 30,000 Braille titles that have been human transcribed into Braille in both English and French, including a 1,600 title print Braille collection. We also offer 6 magazines in Braille. Book titles offered in Braille include a broad range of leisure reading for kids and adults in both fiction and nonfiction. In general, titles geared at a younger audience are transcribed using uncontracted Braille, and titles starting at mid-level reader and above are transcribed in contracted Braille. In addition to human transcribed Braille, CELA offers the ability for users to request Braille files that have been automatically generated from Bookshare's collection of over 1 million digital books in EPUB or other accessible text format. CELA is dedicated to providing Braille access to our users in both physical and digital formats. This includes single-use physical embossed Braille sent by mail using Canada Post's Literature for the Blind free delivery service, print Braille children's books with both the text and the image captions included in Braille alongside the printed text, electronic BRF files or other accessible text formats available for download by those who have a compatible refreshable Braille display. CELA provides training for users, educators, and member libraries, and we regularly present webinars on CELA's Braille offerings to raise awareness about the importance of Braille and how you can access it via CELA's collections. In 2023, CELA undertook a survey of our Braille users to better understand how we can shape our Braille services moving forward. For more information about CELA and our Braille services, please visit celalibrary.ca. That's CELALIBRARY.ca.
Thank you to our sponsors, CNIB Beyond Print and CNIB Next Generation. And we have two door prizes here. We have a Envoy Connect for Nancy Gill, will be in contact with you, and a CNIB Next Generation Braille package for Yoko Heiss. So we will be in touch with you as well. Thank you so much. And congratulations.
Hi, my name is Karen Brophy. I am the lead for Braille Literacy Youth Programs with the CNIB Next Generation team. I'll give my contact information at the end of this intro in about 2 minutes. So my programs support and encourage students who are learning or using Braille in Canadian schools. We provide motivation, sometimes cash prizes, for them to practice and improve their skills. A few examples include the Braille Creative Writing Contest, which has been running for decades, and a fairly new art competition that we offer during Braille Literacy Month. I've had many different jobs at CNIB, but they have all revolved around Braille. Whether I was facilitating textbook production or obtaining interlibrary loans, every day in my early career I found myself telling readers, "We don't have that book in Braille," "We can't find or get that book for you in Braille," or as a charity, "We can't currently justify the expense of producing that book in Braille for you." As a reader myself, that made an indelible impression, especially the thought of young people not being able to get their hands on books that could improve or change their lives. This August, CNIB is excited to be offering a retreat for Canadian teachers of visually impaired students at our Lake Joe facility in Muskoka. Literacy for All will focus on Diane Wormsley's I Am Able system for teaching Braille. Also on the agenda, opportunities for networking and as much creative Braille fun as I can squeeze into 4 days. The door prizes I've provided are a selection of resources which will be fun for anyone who has a youthful spirit or a young Braille learner in their lives. That should be all of you. Here comes that contact info I promised. Phone or text me at 647-302-4047 or email me Karen, Karen, .brophy, BROPHEY, at cnib.ca. Don't forget the E in my last name.
What do you wish everyone knew about Braille? With Ioana and Natalie.
I would like everyone to realize that just because we have screen readers and text-to-speech, this does not make Braille obsolete. And Braille is efficient, it's versatile, it's elegant, and fun.
What do I wish others knew about Braille? That it's more than just a code or a system. For me, it's really part of my identity, and many others feel the same. There's many things I would not be able to do without Braille. Also, that you can still benefit from Braille even if you have low vision. Many Braille users do have some remaining vision, and you may find Braille more helpful than print if the lighting is poor, or you just have visual fatigue, or you just want to get away from audio or other technology. It's not any harder to learn than print. I always find that to be a funny thing to explain because there's no real logic to the print system. There's no reason why an A looks like an A or a B looks like a B. But there is a logic to the Braille system, and I love talking about that to people because as soon as they realize that, it's like the light bulb goes on and it's like, oh, that does make sense. And then once you understand that logic, it becomes much easier to learn the rest of the alphabet. And Braille is vital, important, but also a lot of fun.
What impact has the availability of ebooks had on Braille use and the availability of Braille? With Jen and Letitia.
It is really hard for me not to get super excited about this because while, yes, we have a long way to go, and yes, there are issues in the accessibility world. I have always been an avid reader, and I was that person, as a kid, I would go into a bookstore and I would want to cry because there were so many books and I couldn't access them. And so the availability of Braille books now compared to then, while not perfect, it's hard for me even to find the words to describe without sounding trite. So this has had a huge impact on me. I feel like it's very rare that I want to read a book and I can't access it. I could count on one hand the number of books in the last year or so that I've really wanted to read that I haven't been able to find any other way. And so this is huge for me because I just love to read books. And so the availability of Braille, even though it's not always perfectly transcribed Braille for books, novels, it's totally fine, right? For kids in school and for tests, obviously we want this to be really good, but we want the quality to be top notch. But I'm happy to read a novel that maybe isn't, necessarily the best output of Braille. So super exciting for me. I could go on about that all day, but I will stop now.
This is a tricky question because the availability of ebooks has increased I would say the accessibility of written content. But at the same time, for those who can afford Braille displays and other Braille devices, the availability of ebooks kind of give them that also increase their, how will I say it, the usage of Braille, because then they don't have to, they have the content available to them. They can also use the content in Braille. Like for me, when I'm tired and I don't want to listen to something and I want to read a book, I don't need to be listening to the screen reader or voiceover or whatsoever. I can just plug in my Braille display and read. But on the other hand, what the availability of ebooks has done is to reduce the availability of printed Braille. So now you have less printed books like paper Braille books and more digital Braille.
How has producing and acquiring accessible books changed? What still needs improvements? With Laura and Rianne.
Hi there, my name is Laura Brady. I have worked in trade publishing in Canada for many years, both inside publishing houses and on the outside as an accessibility consultant. Producing Braille editions is one of the best things I've ever done as a production manager. It gives me great personal satisfaction to do things like collaborate with Nels to make Braille versions of picture books and novels. It wasn't cost effective or easy, but it was thrilling to make something inclusive and frankly really cool. I was once told that the simultaneous publication in Braille, print, digital, and audio was publishing first, and honestly, it's such an adrenaline surge. Who needs roller coasters or mountain climbing when inclusive publishing is right there? That said, it isn't a stretch to say that most publishers don't consider Braille as a part of their publishing process, and this is a real failing in the supply chain, especially a publishing ecosystem that is driven by capitalist concerns. Nonetheless, in my work teaching in the publishing programs at both Toronto Metropolitan University and Simon Fraser University, I spend time on Braille publications and ask students to incorporate robust accessibility considerations on their final projects. A great deal of publishing in Canada relies on collaborative partnerships, and thinking in those terms and encouraging future publishing workers to think that way advances the space around the formats we publish in meaningful ways. My very favorite project was a Braille edition of This Is How I Know, a bilingual picture book by Brittany Luby that included, wait for it, tactile graphics. So I'm just showing one of those graphics in the video. This edition simply would not have happened without the encouragement and collaborative labor from Nels, from my friends at Nels. The author was also an enthusiastic supporter and posted on her social media about it, thus raising the profile of both that edition and of Braille publications generally. So like a collaborative, a full circle in a way, which really drove the success of that edition. And in my work on the boards of my local public library and the Accessible Books Consortium, I happily spend time arguing for the acquisition of Braille editions, despite being an ebook specialist. One of my guiding principles is that readers with print disabilities should have format choice, including physical and digital Braille.
One of the most significant changes in the last 5 years concerning producing and acquiring accessible content is awareness. More and more people and publishers are more aware that accessible content is needed. However, more education is required for publishers to understand the need to produce an alternate format for some use cases, including Braille, and that the accessible EPUB is not a viable solution for all people. People are allowed to choose their preferred reading method, not just what's available or is easiest. Another significant change has been the increased use and access to lending and borrowing worldwide through the Marrakesh Treaty and the Accessible Books Consortium. Highlighting NNELS, the National Network for Equitable Library Service. Hi, my name is Rianne, and I'm the Braille and Accessibility Testing Coordinator at the National Network for Equitable Library Service, or NNELS. Launched in 2013, NNELS was established to address the reading needs of individuals with print disabilities. NNELS plays a unique role in supporting public libraries with accessible format materials, recognizing that these materials and services are a fundamental aspect of the work of public libraries. NNELS operations are managed by the British Columbia Libraries Cooperative based in Vancouver, BC, and funded through two funding streams, provincial and territorial, and federally through Employment and Social Development Canada. NNELS has 20 staff members, half of whom have a print disability. NNELS is overseen by a steering committee that includes members of the 8 provinces and territories that fund NNELS core work, and the BC Libraries Cooperative Board. NNELS is a digital collection of materials in accessible formats. It operates in close collaboration with libraries across Canada, ensuring equitable access to reading content and promoting inclusion for all Canadians. NNEL's primary purpose is to support libraries in Canada in the distribution of accessible format materials for people with print disabilities, contributing to an equitable reading landscape. With federal grant funding, NNELS produces human transcribed Braille in English and in French, in digital and physical formats. Hundreds of digital Braille titles are available for download from the NNELS repository. Physical Braille titles are available from all Canadian public libraries through interlibrary loan. Two of our most popular initiatives include our Print Braille collection, which can be found in over 30 host libraries across the country, and borrowed through interlibrary loan from your local public library, and our simultaneous print and Braille release projects, where NNELS works with publishers to ensure a Braille book is available alongside the release date of its print counterpart. Many titles from both initiatives include tactile graphics. Last year, we had the pleasure of working with Jamie Oliver's Canadian team over at Penguin Random House to work on a double simultaneous release of Jamie Oliver's cookbook 5 Ingredients Mediterranean, complete with described images, alongside his debut novel, Billy and the Giant Adventure for young readers. These books had international reach and noted our first cookbook simultaneous release. In addition to the annual World Braille Days events, NNELS has Braille display reviews made by people who use Braille displays regularly for their work and play, as well as guides for downloading and reading electronic Braille files from the NNELS repository or several popular Braille displays. NNELS also prides itself on working alongside APH, DAISY, and other key stakeholders in the development of EBRF and looks forward to producing titles in EBRF alongside BRF for our collection upon its release. For more information about NNELS or to access the many Braille resources and books,
visit nnels.ca.
Have you noticed an improvement in access to Braille in post-secondary education? With Ginny and Nancy.
I think I have noticed some improvement, but unfortunately, I think it's at the cost of the student. So when I was at my first post-secondary school, I fought to get Braille for about 6 years. My last year there, I finally saw my first Braille book for a literature class in poetry. And in the school that I'm in now, my second post-secondary institution, it's still a struggle. I don't think anyone's saying that unfortunately no one is fortunately no one is saying that Braille isn't needed. And everyone agrees, that it is needed, but I think that there's this hesitation and kind of pushback when I do request it, whether that's okay, it's going to take this long of time to produce it, whether that's we need 100 things done before it can be produced, whether that's okay, you can't actually keep the Braille books because it costs too much money, and we want to kind of make a library at the student's expense and at their learning expense. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement there, shortening this the way in which students can request and access those materials. And maybe there does need to be a library or a hub of Braille materials made, but not at the expense, of the student, and making sure that the student doesn't have to wait 3 to 4 months into the semester to get the necessary course materials.
So we don't directly request Braille files from publishers. We request PDF files and then convert or request transcription through Arrow. What we have noticed, however, over the last 5 years is that fewer publishers are willing to provide files. They often refuse the request, telling us that their EPUB is accessible and that should be sufficient for the student. Even if we, counter saying, but this is, to provide Braille files, they still will say, no, this file is accessible, this should be sufficient. So we end up scanning the print copy in-house when there is a print copy available. But occasionally publishers don't create a print copy. And in that case, the student doesn't get a choice in what format that they are able to use.
How have we seen Braille in libraries change? What changes are still needed? With Ginny, Letitia, Lori, and Rianne.
So I don't visit the public library often, just because in my younger days I didn't really see a lot of Braille access. I saw a lot of audiobook access. So unfortunately, I don't know about that. I definitely know that my local library, when I did contact them a couple of years ago for something, did have a partnership with NELS, which was great to see. And I think more and more libraries are just learning about things and progressing, which is great to see. In terms of libraries at school or academic institutions, unfortunately, I haven't seen any accessible materials.
I think the big change I've seen, we have gone from completely printed Braille, paper Braille, to more electronic Braille. I've seen a lot of books, electronic Braille. So now it's good, but also for older people who maybe don't have access to new technology devices, that can be a little bit of a problem. When you have some books are essentially in electronic Braille, not in a printed Braille. In some ways, a good things, but for older folks, it can be challenging.
SELA works through public libraries across Canada to provide Braille materials to people with print disabilities. SELA now offers a collection of more than 30,000 human transcribed Braille titles. In the last 5 years, we have over doubled our collection. We've been able to add more than 12,000 Braille titles from the NLS in the United States, thanks to the Marrakesh Treaty, and over 7,000 Braille titles in French from our partnership with SQLA in Quebec. Demand for physical embossed Braille is still by far the preferred format. This has remained relatively steady over the last 5 years. Single-use embossed Braille was introduced in 2018, and since then, waiting times for Braille have been reduced significantly. Digital downloads of Braille titles continue to be a popular choice as well, though the cost of refreshable Braille displays for reading can be a barrier to many. SELA undertook a Braille survey of our users in late 2023, which provided us with important information to shape our Braille services moving forward. Some of the suggestions included providing more support for adult Braille learners, adding more choice for both uncontracted and contracted Braille across all age categories, expanding our Braille collection to include more languages other than English and French, and providing more training and awareness on how to use refreshable Braille displays.
Many libraries are embracing providing services to people with disabilities. While there is still room for improvement, I believe that libraries no longer think that people with disabilities should be accessing a separate service. In the last 5 years, NELS and SELA worked together on a project called the Public Library Accessibility Resource Center, or PLARC, to help provide libraries with training materials and resources to make their libraries more accessible. More and more libraries are building small collections of Braille into their catalog, improving access to their programming, and ensuring Braille signage and wayfinding are included in their spaces. I would encourage people with disabilities to continue giving their libraries another chance and experience those improvements, and continue providing feedback to their libraries, and then go back again.
Well, first, I'd like to thank any faculty and staff that is already thinking about how to increase accessibility and access to Braille at the post-secondary level. In terms of advice, though, for faculty, if a student tells you that they prefer or need Braille, believe them and listen to them and use that as a starting point so that they don't have to try to justify that request, that need. And then learn about what you could do from the start to facilitate that, right? If all of your handouts are available electronically, that already is a huge help. And then how can you make those documents more accessible from the start? So if you have images in your slides, ensure that there are alt text descriptions, which are essentially like written descriptions of images that a Braille user or someone using access technology can read whenever they encounter an image in that document. For disability service providers, I've seen examples of in-house production within colleges and universities, which is great, but many post-secondary disability service providers don't actually know Braille. So I would encourage you to learn about the resources available to become proficient in Braille, like the CNIB Braille transcription courses, so that we can not only have access to Braille, but access to high-quality Braille. And for students, my best advice is to get to know the other Braille users in your community, other blind students in your community. It's a great, resource if you're encountering technical issues with your Braille display, or if you just want to bounce around ideas, if you need to advocate for Braille, and just to know others in your community. I think that was certainly very helpful to me as a student.
Highlighting PRCVI, the Provincial Resource Center for the Visually Impaired.
Hi, my name is Adam Wilton, Program Manager of the Provincial Resource Center for the Visually Impaired, or PRCVI. PRCVI is located in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. We're grateful for the ability to live, work, play, research, and share knowledge from these ancestral lands. PRCVI was established in its current form in 1993. However, we were originally founded out of the closure of the Jericho Hill School for the Blind, located in Vancouver, in the mid 1980s. And so when that school closed, there was a need to shift the school's resource library so that it could be made available to teachers and students across the province. And so PRCVI was born as a resource library. We're a team of 18 professionals covering a range of different skill sets and strengths, ranging from Braille transcribers, alternate format producers, library technicians, educators, and administrative staff. We are mandated and funded by the British Columbia Ministry of Education and Childcare as one of British Columbia's provincial outreach programs. PRCVI is mandated to support school districts and independent schools in their efforts to ensure meaningful, equitable access to learning for blind and low vision students. We produce and lend Braille format materials on request from teachers of students with visual impairments on behalf of students. We also share materials across Canada with partner agencies and organizations working in the education sector. We have a range of in-person events and virtual content that support and celebrate Braille teaching and learning. In terms of events, we host our annual Braille Challenge regional event. And so students who read and write in Braille come together, both in person and online, to compete and also to share in their love of Braille. Virtually, we have our Braille Bite series with activities and ideas and resources for supporting tactile exploration skills for all learners. You can find more information on both of these and the full range of PRCVI services on our website at prcvi.org.
What is the biggest challenge when it comes to Braille support in K-12 post-secondary and beyond? With Adam, Ginny, and Nancy.
Availability of Braille materials in the education sector does remain limited. While titles are shared between agencies and organizations, most titles require original transcription to be able to meet student requests. I think we have a long way to go to ensure timely delivery so that learners are always on pace with their peers who read print. Producing materials in digital accessible format that students can read on a refreshable Braille display or other device is an important step to addressing this shortage, no doubt. However, I believe strongly that students should have the opportunity to read according to their access preferences and not only to their access requirements. If a student finds it easier, more effective, or simply more enjoyable to read hard copy Braille materials over digital formats, my hope is that we can honor that preference without always defaulting to baseline requirements to achieve equitable access.
I think one of the biggest challenges is probably money. It's always money and funding and where that funding is going to come from, but also, providers and time. Because, for my K-12 experience, I had a pretty positive experience because there's a set curriculum, and typically most of the books I used were used by other students, so they were available. I think in post-secondary, because professors are often building a different syllabus, there's a lot of changes to course texts. That is not being done as often because the books are also changing, and we don't have as many resources as the K-12 system does. And I think, the funding as well as the providers of how many people and organizations are actually, doing this task. Do we need to have more people hired, whether that's in-house, right? Because I know that, we partner with an organization. Maybe it's okay, one organization for the whole province isn't working. And I think that systemically we need to look at that. And that's what we are not doing, unfortunately.
So I think there are two challenges. The first one is time. So at least in undergrad, a large number of the courses are taught by sessional instructors. And these instructors are not hired until the first day of class. But to be able to do a good job producing Braille, you really need to start that process at least 4 to 6 weeks in advance. Contacting the publisher, getting the files, doing the transcription, and having the material ready for the first day of class. So we're quite often really far behind the 8 ball. So last January, we started having a conversation with HR and a bunch of other key players on campus to have the sessional instructors come in a few weeks early and provide some of that information. The textbook material, the course outline, so we knew which chapters to work on. But part of that depends on the availability of the instructor as well. So I know that this is an issue that other institutions face as well. So that's one. The other are attitudinal barriers from publishers. So when we are contacting a publisher and requesting an alternate format, and they're responding with, that there is an accessible EPUB and that should be sufficient, and failing to provide us with a PDF so that we can convert into Braille. I think they don't recognize the literacy component of reading print Braille, and why it's so important to have access to it. So that would be the other big, challenge to access. Hopefully, we can educate the publishers on why it's so important. And then the time issue, we are working with key stakeholders on campus, and I feel like that's an issue that we're working through.
Thank you to our sponsor, Canadian Assistive Technology. And before we get to our winners, we just have a quick message from Daphne.
Oh, thanks, Rianne. So, folks, I understand we're running a little bit over time, and so we understand if anyone wants to leave, but we will continue this conversation for those who are able to stay. And before you slip away, I just want to remind you that this presentation has been recorded. And when you go to the recording, you'll find it will be bonus content at the end of the recording that continues the conversation far beyond when we close things down today. So I'll leave it with you, Rianne, to continue on.
Thank you. So we have 2 winners of store credit or gift cards for Canadian Assistive Technology. The first goes to Faye Nadowski and the other one to Carolyn Taves. So congratulations to the 2 of you. I'll be in touch. And thank you to our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Steve Barclay from Canadian Assistive Technologies. We are an assistive technology company headquartered in Vancouver and doing business all across Canada. We provide solutions for low vision, blindness, physical disabilities, augmentative communication, dementia, and hearing loss. I've been involved with Braille since I first started in the industry over 34 years ago, starting as a service technician repairing telesensory VersaBrailles. You might have to Google those. Years back, along with Special Education Technology BC and the University of British Columbia, I helped co-author a study on the effects of refreshable Braille technology on literacy for school-aged children. Spoiler, Braille helps improve literacy. I was the guy who first introduced the Mountbatten Brailler to Canada, a product I'm still passionate about. My colleagues and I also developed a UEB Braille chart, which you can get for free just by asking nicely. I believe in the power of Braille, as I'm sure you do. So, to make it more available to teachers, Canadian Assistive Technology offers a loan program. We have many of the most popular Braille displays available for loans of up to 2 weeks to try them out with your students to see if they'd be a good fit. Our latest addition to the loan program is the new Monarch multi-line Braille display from Humanware, which we're very excited about. It could be a real game changer in Braille education. You can find us online at www.canasstech.com, that's CANASSTECH.com, or you can phone us at 1-844-795-8324. So from all of us at Canadian Assistive Technology, I hope your future is bumpy, but well formatted.
Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here. And I am going to just remind people that this recording has been, this presentation has been recorded and will be available on the NELS website as well as the BLC YouTube. So for our panelists who are still here with us, we have Natalie and Peter, Nancy, Jen, and Kim. Thanks for being here today. We really appreciate it. And I want to just give you that opportunity to comment or add on to the questions that we discussed in the previous section, or just to let us know if you have any closing remarks. So I'll turn this over to you. Thank you. I'm just wondering.
Well, I'll say something because I always say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Well, I know maybe this will open the door for others, but it just struck me how wonderful it is to hear so many passionate voices about Braille in so many different capacities and age ranges. I just love that it felt like a quilt or a mosaic of some kind, you know, and I'm just really grateful that so many people are passionate about Braille, because as we sit in our own little corner of the Braille universe by ourselves, sometimes we don't buy into that myth that Braille is obsolete, but we feel like we're fighting Braille alone, for Braille alone, which it just, hearing this, all of these voices makes me realize that we are not. So it gives me more energy to carry on the advocacy work of ensuring that we have Braille. So I'm just grateful for everyone's contributions, and I want to say a big thank you to Rianne for spearheading the organizing group. That was a privilege for me to be on the organizing group, but just thank you to her for collecting and patching together all these recordings, because that's a big lot of work. And to the sponsors and to the people donated the prizes too. It's just good.
This is Jen. I would just like to say, as I was listening to all this, thinking, oh my goodness, is there ever a lot to say about Braille? Like, I think sometimes we keep hearing these messages about Braille not being this and not being that. And like Kim said, we don't, we know that's not true. But when you listen to all these different questions and all these different discussions, at least for me, I'm sort of struck by how much is going on in the world of Braille and what we have to look forward to and how many things there are to say.
This is Natalie. I agree. I want to thank all the organizers who put this event together and all the other speakers. I loved listening to everyone speak so passionately about Braille. I think it's especially timely and exciting because it is 200 years since Braille was introduced. And one of the things that I really that was really highlighted for me in all the comments is how dynamic Braille is. It's like Jen said, it's constantly changing and keeping up with all the other changes around us. There's so much more to look forward to in future. And it's so nice to be able to connect with others who feel just as strongly about the importance of Braille, to celebrate, how far we've come already and all that we have to look forward to in the future.
Well, thank you. Anything else?
Can I just also thank everybody for organizing this? It's been a great experience. I really don't know what else to say other than thank you so very much for inviting me to be here. It's been fantastic listening to everybody and their experiences, because as a service provider, it's really your experiences that help us to produce Braille. That's been like a really critical part. Somebody like there've been several experiences about Braille in the post-secondary education experience, and I think it's really critical hearing those experiences and hearing how we can improve. And I know that, each institution is really different, but I think those experiences are so critical. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nancy, and Natalie and Rianne and Kim. I think Peter has stepped away. And at this point, Rianne, if there's anything you need to add, or shall we turn things over to Diana?
They can go straight to Diana.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to applaud all of you who have hung in for this wonderful presentation. And in closing, I would like to thank all the organization agencies who put this program together, our live and pre-recorded panelists, our door prize donors, and all of you, our audience, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to enjoy this today and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So thank you from the organizing committees. Have a great day.
Thank you, and we'll do this again in French on Tuesday. And for those who are, as they're leaving, don't forget to check out our Braille Boost. Forgot to put that in your notes. Sorry, Diana. I just thought of it now.
I know.
Oh, thank you so much. Everyone did an amazing job.
Well, we still have 27. That's cool.
Well, Nancy, you're still here. Natalie, you're still here. Just as people are leaving, I'm eager to know. If you could travel back in time, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, that's a good question, Mrs. Natalie. I mean, for about half a second, I was reluctant to learn Braille, which is kind of crazy to think about now when I was very young. But very quickly, I came to see how much of a difference it made in my life, even though at the time I had some low vision, and how cool it was to be able to read in the dark. But I could have never imagined how many other developments there would be in the world of Braille, how that one day with a Braille display, I could easily access anything that is online, and all the other things that we've talked about today that we now have that, yeah, we do need to continue advocating to have more of that and to provide that to everyone. But I think going back to be able to tell myself all the very cool things that Braille would allow me to do and places where Braille would become available to me, that's what I would do.
I'm sorry, Anne, this is Maurice. I didn't leave the meeting because I wanted to hear Natalie's answer about that.
So this is Nancy. I really struggled with this one. I kind of had a joking answer, buy stocks in Amazon. But I think that I really struggled with this one. I've been in this working in this department for about 13 years, and it surprises me how, and I'm probably going to go off track a little bit, but how much more successful Braille readers are. And if I could go back and maybe tell educators not to, tell students not to learn how to read Braille, I think that's what I would do. Braille is so important to learn how to read. It's a predictor at least in my experience of student success. All of the Braille readers that have come through while I've been in my role have been incredibly successful in their education. So I think that's not my younger self, but other people That's what I would do.
Thanks, everyone. Happy World Braille Literacy Month.
Yeah, happy time, everybody. It was such a great event. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.